Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled to welcome you to an initiative of mine which is all about empowering women to take charge of their professional destinies and their rightful place at the table. Welcome to Talk the Walk. In a world where women's achievements go unnoticed and their voices are often not heard, Talk the Walk here is dedicated to changing the narrative. And how are we doing that? We are doing that by fostering women entrepreneurship, corporate mentorship, and leadership development. Through mentorship programs, workshops, and networking events, Talk the Walk shall be helping women to amplify their voices, build gravitas, excel in their careers, and make sound decisions for themselves. I shall be launching a series of video podcasts which will be all about celebrating each of these women in diverse sectors in the Indian economy, talking about their successes, their journeys, supporting each other and celebrating their success. Welcome to Talk the Walk. Hi everyone. Today we have the privilege of welcoming to Talk the Walk Meeta Gangrade. Meeta is a trailblazing leader in the technological world whose work embodies resilience and innovation. As Steve Jobs had once said, innovation distinguishes leaders from the followers, and Meeta embodies this very sentiment. With over 2 decades of work experience, Meeta navigates the ever-changing technological landscape with aplomb. She displays her leadership skills, commitment to digital innovation, strategy, through working with very large companies. She's worked with HCL Europe, TCS, and currently she is the advisor, investor, and the chief growth officer of Exensio. How does Meeta do it all? She does it with her commitment towards leadership, impact, innovation, and societal change. So you may ask, who is Meeta beyond the boardroom, and how has she managed to reach over here? We are here to find exactly that bit out. Welcome, Meeta. You have done all of this by yourself in the tech landscape, which is predominantly male-oriented.
Right.
Your journey has been thrilling. I have known you since school days. You are on the board of companies. You have made strategic contributions to large corporations in their revenue, growth, and success. You've done it all, and beyond the boardroom, you're an advocate of mental health. You believe in preserving traditional art forms. I would like you to take our viewers through your journey in your own words.
Thanks, Sanchita. First of all, loving coming to Delhi in the winter and having this talk with you. And it's so let me start off from actually my college. I mean, school was of course very formative years. I come from a background where my dad was an ISRO. We were actually sort of raised in the south, though we had like the northern roots. A lot of my time in the childhood went into a lot of cultural discovery of India because I used to travel a lot by train. Of course, the middle class upbringing, you had only 2 choices. You could either do engineering or medicine. And of course, living within the ISRO fraternity, that was also like a super more focused choice that you had to make. But deep down, I did enjoy the sciences. Right, so there's a lot of that. Sometimes we just think that sciences are bad or tech is bad or whatever, but if I kind of reflect on myself, I do think I loved tech always. I would be the first one to rig up computers at home or do things like that. But like as we grew, and I think fortunately I got into engineering, and during engineering I got picked up for a students exchange program, and that kind of changed my life dramatically because it was funded by a VC. VC was a very unknown term in India in 1996. Like you never knew what these things were. In fact, internet exploded in the US then, but it was still beginning to just sort of come into India. And then like interacting with Bill, who picked up 5 students from Germany, China, Chile, the US. It was a very interesting experience for us to start communicating on the computer the first time, right? Like, so wow. Even though I think I did an electronics engineering, I don't think I'd seen a computer in my life. We passed our C exams, probably reading textbooks more than actually typing any piece of code. But then exposure to that kind of made me realize, oh, there's a whole world of what technology can do with you. And that's, I think, where my fascination for both startups and technology started. traveling across the world and meeting all these people was also a different experience where it boosted my confidence a lot. Like a lot of times, I think we also had a little bit of that colonial hangover, right? You know, you think everything outside India is far superior than you, but then I think the first moment of triumph happened when I actually became one of the board members within, like I got elected by everybody in the global space to represent them in the board for the students, right? And I realized the skills that I brought was actually a larger moderating perspective where I could appreciate what the Chinese had to say and the Germans had to say and bring everybody together. So I think rallying people, bringing people on the same page, fostering people towards a forward-thinking outlook was something that I think I developed very subconsciously during those days. It also gave me an opportunity to demonstrate leadership in organizing symposiums. We would do interesting projects across the globe. So that exposure was really good. And I always felt deep down that I wanted to run my own thing someday. But equally, I think the middle class mindset tells you, nahi, naukri karo, earn your living, you should pick the tried and tested, do your engineering. And then I was actually almost wanting to do an MBA. Luckily, the 2000 crash happened when I sort of graduated out of engineering and very few people had jobs. So TCS happened. They would come with a truck usually, but I think I fortunately got picked up and there were just 5 people who were chosen that year and the rest of them actually waiting for companies to come. So despite the big thing inside me that TCS nahi join karenge, it's a large company, I like, chalo, let's go in, and they had this 3-year bond that people used to be very afraid of.
That's right.
Back then, right? That was like sort of the narrative. But again, I think somewhere deep inside, I've always been fascinated by how companies run. So while I think I joined TCS and GE was the biggest client of TCS, I was very fortunate to land into that leadership space because GE was like the leader in TCS. I think it taught TCS a lot about how to run their business. And then I think Mr. Chandra, who's now the chairman of Tata, was fortunately my super boss. And I got to work with a lot of people under him. So while in the day we would do our projects, there was a big program around how to transform TCS happening.
Right.
And most people at my age were more worried about going on site, sticking to enjoying life after office. But I felt like if I really wanted to do something, I had to learn in these 3 years around. So I volunteered for all these projects. I would probably stay at work till 12, 1 in the night.
That's incredible.
And actually navigate. And I think my biggest learning of tech was not just about how tech needs to be written, but how do you make a business out of it, right? And that's something that I think I took away from TCS as to how do they run a $1 billion. That time they were just $1 billion.
That's very strategic of you, I must say.
Yeah, and I think so when I reflect back, I was wondering why did I do those things? And a lot of other people had those same choices. But sometimes I think different age groups, you're carried away by very different priorities. For me, it was always like I was very fascinated by how things worked. So it may be just innate to me. And a lot of men in TCS, fortunately, was actually one of those cultures where I feel like they were very fostering of women. Like when I was doing mental health, and I'll come back to that later, they were one of the first people who set up creches in 1800s.
Wow.
When they set up a company, they would also make sure the women workforce has a way of being able to take care of the larger ecosystem. They would build a lot of these communities because they would, if most of them built townships.
That's right.
They wanted you to have your homes next door. They wanted you to be able to manage all of that. So somewhere that thought process, I felt, at least in TCS, didn't feel like it was a very male-dominated world. I did see a lot of flourishing women bosses. And it was okay to stay back late and women doing all those things. So I think I must thank the Tata Group for the culture that they built, that now when I reflect, maybe that was a great place to enter, despite whatever the world might tell about it being a large conglomerate and you need to start with a startup and things like that. So I think I thank Tata for some of those opportunities. But at some point I realized in tech, you always make choices whether you understand technology, and one of the things that I have a big gripe about in the tech industry is people don't respect the craft anymore. Like if you're in the tech industry, you want to become a manager or you don't want to learn tech anymore. Like people take immense pride in this industry, say, yaar, main code nahi karta hu. And my question to them is, man, you're in the tech industry, if you take pride in the fact that you don't know how stuff works. So there was also this whole disruption in services where growth was only equated to number of people you manage, where you're going away from how code is delivered to getting into
more managerial, yeah.
And that I always felt would always give me a lesser edge in the longer run. Like I can never guide somebody if I don't understand how something works. I was connected to India always, but I loved the story that was emerging over here, the successes that I'd seen. So I said, okay, let me see if I still have an entrepreneur in me. Quit everything, came back. Decided to live without money for a year and say, it's one thing to say you want to be an entrepreneur, and there's another way you can actually live without the certainty of cash flow. Was able to prove that is okay, but I also felt I had a lot to learn in India. So tried working with 4-5 different startups to pick up different aspects of it. One of them was one-to-one help, where I was giving advice to them. It was the largest mental health company at that point of time, but mental health was going through explosion. And as I was advising them, they said, great, you've given us advice, why don't you actually join and run this thing? And that point of time I had a choice of joining as a partner in one of the large big fours or this, but that entrepreneur calling came and said, it's okay, I'll risk whatever it is and actually do this. And I think those 2.5 years were wonderful. And COVID hit, so I was a remote CEO, and that's a very interesting story we can get back to later. Finally, I think when I took them to where they had to, and I think I had everything to offer, I decided to again move on. Because one of the things the promoters really wanted was to make it at least scale ready and things like that. And then it was also a very tiring 3 years, because running a company which also had a suicide helpline, core operations, tech, you have to do everything, right?
Right.
It was pretty draining.
Right.
And therefore, I then now have come back into a bunch of other ideas that I have. So I've started investing in those ideas through people who I believe in, and they're doing it. So one of them is Poco Care, and I still want to do some other pieces. But of course, you need money to run your life. So the Accenture piece is still a good calling, that we are able to use our core skills as a group of 22 to 30 of us. And we're able to actually move the needle quite interestingly within Jio, and we can talk about it. Jio and a couple of other customers. Yeah, so that's been my journey. And of course, throughout all of this, there have been other things happening like Artify, and I think I'm a person who works on 10 projects, and that's what keeps me excited. I can never do one thing. So one of the things I'm trying to do now is documenting 90-year-olds in Bangalore and trying to get the city stories, trying to research how classical music reached Bangalore. So these are sort of my weekend projects. And of course, I run a small group of community for Vipassana. So I'm a big meditator. So these are sort of just a little glimpse of my journey. And now thanks for having me here. And let's sort of talk through it.
That's absolutely fascinating. What an incredible journey. You've brought out so many facets, Meeta. It's just mind-boggling, and a lot of information for us to assimilate right now. But let me give more structure and form to this interview, right? So what do we do at Talk the Walk? What we do actually at Talk the Walk is for us to be interviewing people like you, women like you, who are from very, very diverse sectors in India, right? Nowadays, you look at women, they are in manufacturing, they're in construction, they're in advertising, media, entertainment, pharmaceuticals, research, technology, finance. Women are no longer associated with soft skills, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the very fact that you're sitting here at Talk the Walk with Sanchita verifies this fact. It exemplifies. You actually spoke about hardcore tech skills. Okay,
Yep.
No gift of the gab here, people. No smooth talk. This is a tech woman, right? With her exemplary capabilities in entrepreneurship, innovation, technological background, and yes, a flair for the arts as well, and for societal impact. So interesting. Now, what we would like to know at Talk the Walk is, what are the challenges you faced as a technology woman, right? It's predominantly male oriented. Have you faced any resilience? Have you faced any backlash, any pushback, any resistance in your growth, in your journey? A, how have you dealt with that? Secondly, what our viewers would like to know, say for women to get interested and join the workforce and not get very daunted, to be very intimidated by male and women with technological skills, how do you go about it? How do you join the workforce in large numbers and stick true to your form? Have you had support from your family in your journey. How do you manage to do all of this and more and stay true to form? That would be my question. Another thing which I thought we'll just share in the course of our conversation, a lot of times what we feel is that women are doing incredible work in different sectors, what I just mentioned, right?
Yep.
But their stories are unheard of.
Absolutely.
Why is it so difficult for them to raise their voice at a table, right? Why would you always be a wallpaper in the background? I think Talk the Walk, at Talk the Walk, we try and bring forward these stories which need to be told in terms of how women in India, in diverse sectors, doing incredible work. What do they believe in self-advocacy? Do they really talk about their work? Do they talk about how well they have done, their right at the table, pay equality, and more importantly, do women give priority to corporate mentorship? Do they seek out programs which talk about advocacy? So all of that. A lot of questions for you, Meeta. I went straight off the bat.
We'll unpeel them one by one. So the first question I think you asked was, what were my challenges navigating the tech male world, right?
Right.
There were a lot. I wouldn't say they aren't. And I don't know if those were challenges specific to women or me, right? Like I can't generalize. But fundamentally, the first thing I believe is a lot of, at least being I don't know whether it's my middle class background or my gender background, but we usually are not taught about propagating our work. Like we are not self-promoters of work, which comes very naturally to some set of people. And unfortunately, in a very crowded world, if people don't know what you can do and you're not able to go out there and really talk about it, people believe you don't exist. Like genuinely, right? Like it's a very large organization to get visibility, and I don't think that's just a female problem. It's generally problem of the visibility, right? Like you might have a lot to do, but if you're not able to express and share it with the world in today's day and age, you will not get discovered.
Sure.
So one of the good things to do sometimes is, if you struggle with talking about it, write about it. So blog, like even within company forums, there's a lot of opportunities for you to do that. But coming back to the problem that I faced is, usually I mean if I talk about my HCL days, it's a very male dominated company. I was one of the few tech leaders. When I say tech, people doing actually core delivery work, right? A lot of women who reached senior were either in HR or they were in the diversity group or they were doing other things, not to take anything away from them.
Sure.
But it was like, you kind of reflected and said, why is it that women don't make it this far? And I remember, like, I don't want to quote people, but there were meetings where somebody would say, I need you to come because I have this customer from another geography. They care about diversity, so come as a woman, right?
Sure.
And I think some of the stances I took is, sorry, I'm not going to show up. If that's the only reason you need me to be in the meeting, then it's okay. Like, let them believe what the reality is. Take me if you believe it can make a difference in the deal.
Okay.
Right? But equally, like if I step back, I remember that HCL had no digital business in the US, in Europe. So my bosses, fortunately from the startup that I came, were very fostering of women. Like I don't think they really distinguished between women and non.
He possibly gave you credence for your
my capability,
yes,
right? So the one thing that I believed, and maybe that came from my entrepreneurial field, that wherever I went, I thought I was running the company.
Right.
Like I would do this, like if it was my company, what would I do? Those are the kinds of ways that I would operate and behave. I never looked for instructions. I never looked for somebody coming and telling me, I expect ABCD from you. So having said that, I think he just said, why don't you take a trip to Europe and see what's happening? Why is the business not running? But that's when I went there and realized that it had nothing to do with male egos or egos. There were egos in the company, right? And even in these complex structures, you have gatekeepers everywhere. Like if you have people who know the customer, and then you need to make your way and figure out how to expand business with that customer. So for the first few months, the strategy that I deployed was, look, I want to make everybody happy. It doesn't matter, like they need to start seeing my impact in the meeting. So whether the meeting is good, bad, ugly, I'm going to go show up.
Sure. We can clearly see your passion coming through this interview. I mean, you are so passionate about what you do.
Absolutely.
And you do it really well.
Thank you.
And she really knows how to lean in, doesn't she? It's all about leaning in and speaking up for yourself. So Meeta, catching on to what you just spoke about, in fact, your personal life, not getting married was your choice. However, a lot of people might just accuse you that you've done phenomenally well
Because I didn't get married.
because you didn't get married.
Absolutely.
So let's understand this better. Not getting married to getting married, how have these decisions been perceived by the workplace at large and by you in your career journey? That's point number one. Secondly, you brought out some very interesting trivia over here. Not trivia, I would say wisdom over here in terms of how women should be cherished, actually not just by their soft skills but by actual content, hardcore technical knowledge, and using that, using self-advocacy, using talking to advocate these hard technical skills and to lean in on a corporate table, right? So let's explore this further. We talk about personal lives. When we talk about personal lives, I've known you for years, and although you're not married, I am aware that you are involved with a lot of relationships in terms of your family members, extended families, friends. You do tremendous work which has societal impact, various communities, and you do all of that with great panache. So what would be your takeaway to people who are married, right, who are getting into, say, the technological sector? Should they be looking at family support? People who are single, what should they be looking at? How do we utilize our technical skills augmented with our soft skills of communication, leaning in, advocacy, corporate mentorship? Do women actually go for all of these to do well for themselves in a corporate workplace?
Wow, that was a loaded question and lots of layers to unpeel, but let me go one by one. So firstly, I really believe in the institution of marriage. I'm not somebody who believes marriages are bad and things like that. I understand how they work. It didn't work for me. That's a personal choice I make. So I want to start with that disclaimer that I don't think that marriage is a bad thing. It's a choice you need to make whether it's going to work for you or not. Personally, for me, given the number of things I was going to get involved with, so I'm very committed to my extended family. Like you rightly said, my friendships, I've been like godmothers to several of my nieces and nephews. I love kids, I love teaching kids. But I always also knew that my pursuits for multiple things would always come in the way of probably my ways of how a family construct would work. And
Sure.
I might not do justice to it in the way that, but I was self-aware of that fact, right? And I think many women today may not even be self-aware about why are they getting into a marriage.
Very well
purely
said.
right. So I think those should be choices you actually actively make, as opposed to just get pushed into it because somebody else is putting the pressure around you. So that was the first part that I just want to keep aside. But definitely in your workplace, I wish these choices didn't really make a difference. I mean, I wish for a day where the work culture is so integrated that people make room for everything. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of women themselves sort of, I feel like after getting married, start to believe that they can do less at work.
Sure.
In some examples, I've experienced that, right? Whereas they're doing far more than what a male counterpart might be doing at that point, despite having all the other things happening in their life. But they somehow come in very apologetically. And I think it's a very woman thing where if we don't give our 200%, we feel we are not doing enough. Like there are women who are able to demand it straight up front. You build a tremendous amount of negotiation skills even at home with your in-laws, to your husband, to your kids. And I think just reflecting upon it and actually nurturing it might be a good way to figure what is your way of asserting yourself. Nuggets that I might want to leave you behind with.
So what I'm hearing is you think like a leader, you are a leader, is effectively what she's saying. She spoke about a lot of interesting tenets again, which is your own storytelling, augmenting your technical skills with softer skills of leaning in, going actively seeking out corporate mentorship and programs and workshops which actually nurture these skills and help you lean in. Networking.
Absolutely, very important.
Financial independence. She spoke about decision making. So what do you think would spur women to look at financial services and to look at financial freedom to make their relationship with money a little better?
So firstly, I feel like a lot of us today will always have 25 complaints in our life about things that we don't want to be doing.
Right.
Biggest one would be, यार मुझे job ही नहीं करना है. I don't like this boss. The first answer to that is if you can actually not depend on, I mean, why do most people go to work? It will be for money.
Sure.
So the freedom that you can get if you're able to say that I can actually reach a point where I don't need to worry about my day-to-day kharcha and my money is actually sort of taken care of, it gives you a mental freedom to do things very differently.
Right.
Like I firstly feel if you're wedded to a job because you look at it as a financial output, you make worse choices when you're making negotiations at the workplace. I'm not saying you need to leave your job. But first thing financial freedom came for me was when I came back to India and I realized, can I live without money for a year? Not getting a paycheck, is it giving me jitters or am I able to just live my life? And that's when I realized the value of having a rental asset that I had. I had 2 apartments, I got rent from them and that's how I said with this much I can actually live my life very happily, right?
Sure.
And most people can get there. You'll be surprised at how if you had managed your money in very simplistic things, even put it in a regular index fund, you could have still been better off than probably just trying to figure out how to manage your life. So I feel like freedom gives you the power to do so many things differently. It gives you the way to express differently. It gives you the way to even look at all your relationships with a very different perspective, right? When you're not dependent on somebody, automatically your narrative and your language changes. So it is not complicated. If you feel it's complicated, you can talk to many financial advisors. Even the worst ones will make you do a better job than probably you can do yourself if you're not educated enough. And once you get in, you realize it's not so complicated. All you need is to open a bank account, have a demat account of some sort, and sit down with somebody and just spend half an hour and take interest.
Are you a fan of Miley Cyrus?
I am actually.
You can buy yourself some flowers.
Flowers,
right?
exactly. Like why not? Like you go buy a Louis Vuitton bag with the money that you make in the market, whatever works for you, right? Like,
Right.
But yeah, don't shy away from it because you're missing out on an opportunity that can give you an advantage that you never know about.
Excellent. Meeta, it was lovely having you over. I think this interview was very deep and profound in terms of the tenets that she had mentioned, which is actively seeking out corporate mentorship, having a story, what are you here for, where do lie your technical skill, augment that with your softer skills. What is the journey to becoming a successful self-made person? What are those triggers which make you stick true to your form, true to your authentic work self and not give up working in the middle of your life? I think it's been a fascinating story and thank you so much for joining us on Talk the Walk.
Thanks, Sanchita, and a big energy to all the women out there trying to do something around these spaces. I'm sure you'll all do wonderfully well in your lives. You just need to take that leap of faith and dive into it. ठीक है.